The numbers are climbing quickly. Thank you all for joining, the many thousands of you that have signed up for this. We're so thrilled to have you back in action. And so this is our first 2024 Global Health Education Summit. Thrilling to be with all of you. Thank you all for waiting in the wings. There are so many prompt people here. This is awesome to see us already hitting 1,000 or so on right now. So thank you for joining us promptly. I am absolutely thrilled to be joined by an extraordinary group here. We've got Edwin Lee, MD, with me, an endocrinologist out of Orlando, Florida. He and I have been on parallel trajectories over the last 15 years together. We started speaking at similar conferences a long time back, and this has been a joy to be a witness to his career moving. And I think we are both coming out of this field of endocrinology and metabolism with a very bumpy ride of what we were taught, what actually happened, what happens every day in our clinics, and how that ends up feeling. So thrilled to have you with us, Dr. Lee. It's just really a pleasure. Looking forward to that conversation with you. And then Bridget Baylin, if all of you have joined our Global Health Education Summits in the past, you may have caught Bridget already. Bridget has been a huge part of my clinic over the last 15 years. She was really the one that came along to make, I think, palatable to the world everything that we had learned over that previous decade. And she was very instrumental in helping us really carve down all of that experience into what's become the journey of intrinsic health and the messaging there that was practiced both in the clinic as well as in these online environments. And so Bridget has been just an extraordinary colleague, an extraordinarily wise soul, and brings a fount of wisdom for you today out of the area of expertise of Ayurveda. Ayurvedic nutrition and lifestyles are a huge piece of what we ended up practicing in clinic after 15 years of going plant-based and trying all different versions of diets we could come up with. Stumbled into Ayurveda, and then Bridget came into my life as an expert in that space, and really have been blown away by the efficacy of this 9,000-year-old nutrition science in this time that we're in. So Bridget, thrilled to have you back. At any rate, all of you are joining us with the topic of diabetes, and this is going to be an interactive experience over the next 2 hours. So at the bottom of your screen is a Q&A button. You'll hit that Q&A button, it'll open up a new window, and we would love to have your questions flowing in over the course of this talk. And for those of you that aren't inspired to ask the questions, if you are have that window open, you have the opportunity to upvote questions that feel relevant to you. And so that'll make sure of the hundreds of questions that may end up being populated in that Q&A space. We probably won't have a chance to get through that whole thing because it would take us weeks. But we're going to trust you guys to make sure you're upvoting the ones that feel most important, most relevant, so that we at least get to those top ones that answer and address the curiosity from so many of you. So thank you for the reactions that are pumping through right now. Some of you are Zoom experts, knowing how to throw your reactions onto the screen. Love seeing the thumbs up and the hearts. And oh, look at this. Everybody knows how to use Zoom. Look at that. It's a high number of hearts coming through. Love all of you so much. It's a thrill. Before we get started, there's an opportunity for us to go into an extreme creative state. Look at all those hearts flowing through. It's amazing. What I would like to do with all of that love is to create a moment of change for humanity. And that's what we hope these global health education summits do. Certainly there's information that's going to transit in these next couple hours together, but more importantly, we can come into vibrational coherence, really linking our thought processes together to become a creative force for the new humanity. And so to do that, we'll go ahead and sync up right now. And there's a powerful tool that's been used for tens of thousands of years in every single indigenous tradition and wisdom line that I've been exposed to. They use the breath. And so we're going to slow it down for a second. We're going to take a few deep breaths together, a simple technology that is able to bring us into what's called heart coherence and some of the new science that's been coming out. And this is a recognition that our heartbeats can literally line up. And that becomes relevant when we start to think about the entanglement of quantum physics. In quantum physics, we find out that the thoughts of humans can literally change the most distant star in the universe in its conformation. And the ways in which quantum physics has recognized that phenomenon is the fact that matter is fractal throughout the universe. And so you are an element of star. at the fabric level of how atoms function. And so you are linked intrinsically to the whole universe. And we are therefore all obviously linked together through this human experience, the human condition that we are now sharing. And we can perhaps recognize throughout these couple hours that we are all participating in a dream or in a reality that is extremely diseased. There is more suffering on this planet at the health and biologic levels that manifesting in mental health crises, cancer crises, and ultimately this issue of diabetes and metabolism that we're facing today. And so we would like to dream a new dream with you and to really change the way that we're interacting, not just with the information, but the possibilities that the informations lead us to. Can we create that world where the diseases we're going to focus on today become irrelevant? They become something of our history rather than the shared experience that we keep creating. So this is what I hope to do with the Global Health Education Summit is open up these avenues to be creative with you all to create a new possibility. So to do that, let's go ahead and sit up straight in our chairs, uncross your legs, put your feet flat on the ground, let your shoulders drop away from your ears. Experience your spine for a second. We don't pay much attention to the spine, and yet it does so much work all day. So finding that neutral straight spine where suddenly it takes less effort to sit because you're not slouched and you're not overstraining to arch your back. It's a neutral spine, holding your head erect, easy space. Find that little balance, tilt forward, tilt backwards until you find that kind of 0 point where suddenly it's like, oh, wow, that takes no energy right there. Come into that alignment. Focus back on your shoulders. Let those drop away from your ears. Let gravity take effect there, pulling your shoulders down. And let's take a first exhale because we have to get the air out before we can breathe in. So just blow air out of your lungs. Keep blowing, keep blowing. And now we're ready for our first breath. So take a deep breath in. Keep going, keep going. A little bit more, a little bit more. Take another whiff of air and now hold it. And now release slowly. Keep releasing, keep releasing. Spine straight. Feel the gravity take all that air out of your body and hold it at the bottom. Now, gentle deep breath all the way in. Big, big, huge breath. Keep going, keep going. You might have to expand the chest more. You might have to let your belly come out. Take the hugest breath you've taken all day. Little sip at the top and hold. And release. And we're together. And we're here. And the reason for the breath is because we need to reset our nervous systems into a state of awareness rather than reaction. And a lot of the problems we face as a society is we've created a whole world based on reactivity rather than a proactive creativity. And so reactivity over creativity is this shift that we need to really practice in our lives in all areas. And we're getting here with this topic of diabetes right to the heart of the matter. Diabetes is a disease of metabolism that has followed on the tails of the obesity epidemic that came out of the 1980s. The 1980s was an interesting decade in that we actually didn't put more sugar into the diet in the first half of that decade. It wasn't like we suddenly put more calories into humans, but humans suddenly became obese. And it was quite sudden, and it became a national crisis almost overnight. You'll remember maybe Nancy Reagan had a push for the new war on obesity and all of this language of warring against it and combating obesity and all of this language of combat, this conflict with obesity came very prevalent, raging into our environment. And ultimately, if you've been following any of our science out of our lab for the last 15 years, you know that a lot of this has to do with not so much the calories in the food, but the chemicals that we were using to grow the food. And so in 1976, we debuted as a crop treatment, as a soil treatment, the herbicide glyphosate in the popular product called Roundup, which would eventually become the foundation of the Roundup Ready genetically modified crops that would hit the market in the 1990s. So between 76 and 1996, when GMO corn and soybean came online, in that 20 years, we started to get exposed to a water-soluble toxin, not just through farming, but through our backyard and front yard practices. In the 1980s, that company, Monsanto, got permission to take that direct to consumer. And you'll remember the Roundup backpacks that were, on the back of the guy, and two pistol grip sprayers, and he'd come out and shoot down the 3 dandelions in the driveway to kill those weeds so that he didn't have to bend down and pluck them out, because boy, that would be annoying. And so the pistol grip sprayer of the Roundup commercials with the Super Bowl kind of soundtrack in the back became so effective that almost overnight, every single household had a backpack or a sprayer or at least a bottle of Roundup on the shelf in the garage, in the backyards, garden space, whatever it was. And so we got introduced to dependence on the ease of a weed killer that was a broad spectrum weed killer. Anything it touched, it would kill. What we did not realize is that this was a water-soluble toxin. We as consumers, certainly the companies, understood this, but the water-soluble nature of this made it actually very easy to distribute. You could put it actually into a sprinkler system on giant farms. You could put it into sprayers and distribute it with water. So very cool aspects from an industry standpoint as to having a water-soluble toxin that could kill life. The downside is everything on the planet is water soluble. And so we started to see this chemical sneaking into municipal water systems, ultimately the air we breathe and the rain that would fall, and everything in between the farm and the ocean starting to be contaminated with detectable levels of this chemical. Today, we spray 4 billion pounds of this chemical into the global environment. 4 billion pounds of a single toxin is logarithmically higher than any other single chemical toxin that we deploy globally. And so this, I believe, has become public enemy number 1. And the reason we are so eager to bring this attention to this disease epidemic today is because over the last year, our laboratory has been able to uncover the exact mechanism by which glyphosate entering in the water system in tiny little parts per million, parts per billion even, in our water system in the 1980s, suddenly collapsed our relationship to carbohydrates and fats. And we suddenly could not process those into ultimately light energy. And we would start to instead store them as fat in the liver and ultimately in the adipose tissue. And so the sudden onset of obesity in the 1980s wasn't because the amount of calories had suddenly leapt between 1976 and 1981. It was because the chemicals in the food, in the water system, suddenly we're blocking the ability of the body to take those into ultimately light energy. And the mechanism by which the cells do that is through the mitochondria. And so Dr. Lee and I, in our subspecialties of endocrinology and second half of that, metabolism, study the mitochondria as the power plant of the cell. And many of you were exposed to that in Biology 101. We were said the mitochondria is the power plant of the cell, it makes energy, blah, blah, blah. Well, what it's really doing is liberating the light solar energy that's stored by chlorophyll in plants from CO2 as a battery source and light as the energy source. So sunlight coming to the plant is suddenly stored between 2 carbon molecules as a double carbon bond. And so in a beautiful way, nature cracked the code a long time ago. How do you allow sunlight to travel into living systems to then be liberated? And the difference between the physics of nuclear fission and fusion of a star and the capacity of life to then re-engage that light or release that light within it is a very, very cool story. The story is that it's about a 1,000-fold jump from the intensity of light per cubic centimeter in a nuclear fission fusion event of a star or our sun, and a cubic centimeter of bacteria, fungi, etc. in the soil. So the bacteria and fungi are capable through fermentation of breaking those double carbon bonds in sugars and fats to release light at a much higher concentration of light energy than was produced by the sun initially. So the difference between physics and life or biology is a concentration of energy, a concentration of light energy specifically. The jump to multicellular organisms happening a few billion years back on this planet was another 10x that. And the innovation that took us from bacteria and fungi to multicellular life was the mitochondria. Mitochondria, akin and very much similar to the bacteria that live inside of plants that we call chlorophyll. Chlorophyll are specialized bacteria that take the carbon to store the energy. Mitochondria are specialized bacteria that live inside multicellular organisms, earthworm all the way to human, to break the double carbon bond that chlorophyll had associated to release the sunlight more effectively than fermentation did. And so multicellular life, earthworm to human, capable of doing respiratory release rather than fermentation as a mechanism for releasing that sunlight. And that 10x leap that came about through the mitochondria was what liberated our capacity to build multicellular creatures. And so this energy of humanity is at this pinnacle of sunlight concentrated ultimately in tissue to coordinate through the highly energy demanding process, the life itself, coordinating life from the energy liberated. And what our laboratory has been working on this year is the exact mechanism by which glyphosate, as soon as it enters a cellular system, starts to poison the mitochondria such that it cannot liberate the energy from the food. And we've been able to show a 30% drop in mitochondrial membrane potential within minutes of touching that mitochondrial membrane. The implications are that minutes from that first consumer being exposed in 1976, minutes from that first exposure, their body started to be unable to take the carbohydrates and fatty acids in their diet into light energy. And so when the mitochondria can no longer build a high membrane potential and it starts to leak, its energy compartments start to leak, it can no longer do the work of liberating the light energy, and you can no longer process the calories. And so those calories naturally back up to the distribution center of the body, which is your liver, and you get fatty liver. Glyphosate exposure is now recognized widely by not just our laboratory, but world over. Glyphosate's the #1 cause of fatty liver worldwide. And when you get fatty liver, you get diabetes. And so we now have 40 to 60% of people screened in inner city urban environments or rural environments and food deserts, 40 to 60% with prediabetes or diabetes. We have over 500 million people that have been diagnosed with diabetes on the planet now. 500 million people with diabetes, and then you have to 2x or 3x that number to capture the prediabetes, and then you have to 2x it again to get the obesity numbers. And so we see children, by age 2, 3 years old, afflicted with obesity because their bodies have been so poisoned such that they cannot process the calories coming in. And so as we start to look at this bigger picture of the last 30 years of life as a human, your ability to be light, your brightness is dimmed by your relationship to a modern food system. The silver lining to our laboratory efforts that we can continue to talk about through the next hour and a half is really looking at nature's capacity to recapture and reinvigorate your capacity to build mitochondrial membrane potential and liberate light from the food you consume. And so that's the journey we're going to take together, is how do we tap into the human potential to light ourselves up to the brightest potential that we have to become the brightest thing in the universe, because we are living life forms, not just physics phenomenons of suns. We are brighter than the sun. And so how are we going to double down on that opportunity and that expression of humanity to create something new? So that's where we're at. That's what we're excited to continue to bring forth from our lab. But more importantly, we need to contextualize that in the experience of, I think, the medical field, and then ultimately as that bigger question of how are we going to become advocates for one another to remarry ourselves to our potential of light liberation. So to that end, Edwin Lee, Dr. Lee, thank you for joining us. Thrilled to have you on board with me. Give us a little bit of a perspective. Your endocrine career has been long and winding, as mine has. You've published books in a number of different spaces, and you're excited about your current chapter of clinical and scientific work that you're currently doing. And so start us at the beginning a little bit. What's your perspective on what's happened over the course of your medical career and the human condition?
Well, I actually learned a lot just listening to the glyphosate story, and I didn't know that it was the #1 cause of fatty liver. And I always assumed that it was carbs, too much sugar in the diet causing fatty liver. But here you showed me a light that's like, wow, it's really the glyphosate poisoning the mitochondria. What's really interesting is that I'm a board certified endocrinologist internist, but I really just practice wellness. I mean, I do have several patients that I've been seeing for over 20 years that type 1 diabetics, and I have a lot of some early type 2 diabetics that I'm trying to reverse. But one modality in my practice that it's the future, and that is therapeutic plasma exchange. I know we talked before this meeting, but I didn't even talk about this. But there is a guy named Dr. Paul Savage, and he has probably studied over 100 patients, paying out of his own pockets to measure glyphosate levels, herbicides, all these parabens, all these toxins that we get accumulated in our body. And when you do therapeutic plasma exchange, it actually removes heavy metals, mycotoxins, and also these environmental toxins. So it's like a oil change. So you need it's a very expensive procedure. So people who need it, they generally can't afford it. It's very expensive. And in my practice, we're probably the least expensive compared to like at Miami or New York City, or even there's 2 other clinics in Orlando, Florida, that offer one therapeutic plasma exchange for $15,000 a session. So you're talking about doing 4, that's quickly adds up. But for my practice, we charge $8,000 if you do 4 of them. So, and we have, I mean, everyone who's doing it is getting younger. Because I'm not measuring glyphosate levels there, but I'm measuring biological age. And I have some patients that come in with dementia, and I know we're talking about type 2 diabetes, but since you got on the glyphosate and environmental toxins, it's just like, look, how can you remove it? And this is one method. I mean, you could talk about doing liver cleanses, and I've been for 15 years or more, I've been in my wellness practice encouraging everyone, hey, let's do a liver cleanse. Intermittent fasting will help. But I mean, if you want to really remove these heavy metals and other toxins out of your body, you need to get this procedure. It's like plasma donation, but we're removing much more plasma than basically through a plasma donation. We're removing up to like 2 to 3, close to 3 liters of plasma out of your body. So we're removing about 50%, depending on your body weight. And in addition, we're giving you back protein, because we're removing a lot of these antibodies and all these chemicals out of your body. So you're losing a lot of protein in your body. So we give you 5% albumin back, and the machine calculates per weight how much albumin you get back. So it's really exciting, because what we do is, I could talk a lot about this, but anyway, that's part of my practice. We do is I'm trying to reverse biological aging. Everyone that comes to my practice, we look at your biological age. We use a company called True Diagnostic. It's looking at markers on top of your DNA. It's really epigenetic science. It's looking at certain methylation on top of your DNA. And what I explain to my patient is like, you're born with really no garbage on top of your DNA, but as you get older, you accumulate a lot of garbage on top of your DNA. And they can measure how much garbage you have. And my job is to kind of remove some of this garbage so you become younger. So that's kind of what I do in my practice. And I totally agree with this epidemic of diabetes. There's a lot of questions about type 1, but I could talk about type 1, and I'll just mention that, look, it's environmental toxins. We live in a toxic world, and it's going to cause, basically, it poisons our immune system. And basically, there's this autoimmune reaction to our beta cells, and you get these antibodies. If you destroy 90% of your beta cells in your pancreas, you're going to get type 1 diabetes. We see a lot more type 2 diabetics than type 1, but what I'm seeing type 1 diabetics. Generally, it affects, teenage and children. But I now see type 1 diabetics later in life, like 40, 50 years old. I mean,
Yeah.
you don't see this. You never.
Yeah,
It's
you're
generally
exactly
a
right.
disease of the youth.
Yeah,
Now you're seeing it in older people.
the epidemiology has definitely changed on these diseases. We never used to see type 2 diabetes in children. That was something that adults got.
Exactly.
We always saw type 1 in children, not in adults, and that has flip-flopped. So
Mhm.
we are seeing that thing. And for all of you listening, it's, obviously everybody wants to sign up to go get younger at Dr. Lee's clinic. What does it mean to get younger is an interesting concept here, and it ties exactly back to the mitochondria. When we are born, we have roughly 200 mitochondria per human cell. In every single neuron, for example, some of the more energy demanding cells in the body, you have 2,000 mitochondria per cell. And so when you multiply that out, you've got roughly 14 quadrillion mitochondria when you start life. Interesting, those mitochondria all come from your mother. You inherit no mitochondria from dad. One of the innovations that allows for live birth to occur in mammals, whereas require an egg in a bird or a reptile, that phenomenon of live birth required a new genetic sequence in the sperm of the mammal that would allow it to dump its mitochondria before it entered the female egg. And so it was actually a retrovirus that was updated our genome that came along and said, no, you're not going to do that. And that epigenetic, that initial epigenetic that then became germline mutation within the mammal, germline meaning that that information was stored in the ovum and sperm of every cell thereafter. We got this update that allowed mammals to occur with about 5 other viruses. So there's about 5 viruses that we can show that these are the ones that really differentiated bird from mammal in the ability to create a placenta, create a environment within the womb that allowed it to take on the features that an egg normally would. And then this update with the sperm and a few others. So there was these critical updates to the viruses, to the virome that life was exposed to, that allowed us to update our function, get these gains of function in place. So imagine yourself with 14 quadrillion mitochondria when you're born. These are proliferated. These are bacteria that live inside your cells, and they grew out of a few, probably 200 mitochondria inside your mother's egg. So your mother's egg ends up populating your entire organic garden. And so at birth, you're this thriving organic garden of many species of mitochondria. We used to just assume there's one species of mitochondria. We now know that even inside of a single cell, the genetics of the mitochondria are so plastic, they change so rapidly that even in a single cell, you could have 50 to 100 different genetic species or variants of the mitochondria within a single cell, and then you look body wide, and you literally have this diverse ecosystem around you. Aging is a relationship to the number of mitochondria per cell and their productivity. And then the second piece of aging is really hydration or dehydration, accelerating the aging process. So mitochondrial density and hydration inside the cell, that determines your biologic age, because if you pump lots of light energy and you have very good crystalline water inside the cell, you can repair it infinitum. And so that's what Dr. Lee's describing there, is this rapid repair process in genetics. And so you get a gene injury, go out in the sun, whatever it is, and it repairs instantly. Protein folding damage, you get a big injury inside the cell from a chemical toxin, the body goes about healing it immediately. And you've seen this in a 2-year-old. They trip and fall, they skin their knee. 2 days later, there's no signs that that thing ever happened. There's no scar tissue. The cells literally just regenerated themselves. As we age, we start to get scar tissue rather than regenerative tissue in the repair process. And that's this decrement of energy available and a decrement of water available. So Dr. Lee, as you're hearing that, you wrote a book about youth and beauty. And so give us a little bit of a journey into what inspired you to write the book in the first place.
Well, I remember going to my high school 10th year reunion, and prior to going that, I got rejected by every single woman for Friday night dance. So I heard every single excuse. Anyway, but I remember going to the 10th year high school reunion, and I remember her name's like Carol, but I won't say her last name, but she was to me she was like the most attractive woman there when I was in high school. She was like a cheerleader, and she had everything going for her, and she was smart. But then when I saw her, she looked like she was 80. And I was like shocked. And to me, from that point, I was thinking, why did she age rapidly than everyone else? I mean, I wanted to ask her, like, did you smoke a lot? Did you do drugs? What did you do? And to me, it's like I just finished, medical school. I was doing my internal medicine residency and just treating a lot of chronic disease and getting good at critical care medicine and doing procedures and helping a lot of people. But I was like early in my career, but in the back of my mind is like, why do we age? And that has been like this journey that I've been going on for like close to like 25 years plus. And is why do we age? And then now, there's over 300 reasons. And one is mitochondrial dysfunction as we get older. So one thing that I do in my practice is we offer to measure NAD levels because that's really drives your mitochondria, because the higher NAD levels, the mitochondria will work better. So a lot of people have very low NAD levels. It's now commercially available to measure it. And if you're low, then, or if you don't want to check it, we can give you a product that has NMN. Sounds like M&Ms, but it's not candy. It's N for Nancy, M for Michael, N for Nancy, NMN. And anyway, it's a powder, and basically it's a precursor of NAD. And David Sinclair talked a lot about it in his book, Lifespan. It was available on Amazon, but since David Sinclair, I think, sold his soul and is going to big pharma and making his own product and making a drug, he asked the FDA to shut down the Amazon production or to get NMN. But through several doctors' office, you can get still NMN. But I mean, who knows? It may be FDA step in this week on too. But it's an amazing product. I mean, I'm using a product that we measure NAD level from one company and switch to another one, and we showed like a significant improvement of NAD levels. So if you can get your NAD working better, the mitochondria will work better. But I have peptides. I know I could talk about peptides forever, but there are two different peptides. One is to make the mitochondria work faster, and that peptide is called MOTC, and the other one's called SS31, which is interesting because it's the mitochondria as it gets older, it stretches out. It's like your elastic in your underwear, and you only can wear that underwear for so long. Eventually, the elastic breaks, and it has no form to it. So SS31 snaps it back in. So to me, you get like a brand new underwear, a new mitochondria function, so that if all the spaces are correct, the electron chain system in our mitochondria to produce ATP. If it's too stretched out, it's not going to work well. So it has to be, I mean, nature is really particular on how the structure works. So I love those peptides. So that's for mitochondrial health, we use those two products. Now there's methylene blue. That's something else. It's a new product that I'm looking into, and it makes your urine really blue, but apparently has data in terms of helping mitochondrial support. So have you used the methylene blue, Zach?
Certainly became very popular at the beginning of the pandemic period. It was recognized as one of those things that could combat and kind of the long COVID conditions and things that were coming after these metabolic injuries from the pandemic that we saw going down. So I ended up not needing to use it clinically. We were using these soil extracts instead, because you get an upregulation of just about everything you can imagine when you put the cells back in touch with natural systems here. But so we were using soil extracts as our main thing. But one of the methylene blue is not a naturally occurring substance; it's a chemical compound. But what we're finding that I get excited about, more than anything else, really, is every big breakthrough we make in technology, plasma exchange being a really good example of it. You do something very invasive, you pull half your blood volume out and then replace it and all this, and you see massively cool things happen with pretty high collateral damage. So, the more invasive we get, we tend to do some harm with the good, all these things. But what it does is it uncovers a whole new way of thinking. And as I've been running around the world the last 10 years, studying with indigenous wisdom keepers all over the world, there's thousands of years old practices that were already understanding the things that we're now uncovering through technology. And they were putting into place simple life practices or nutritional practices that were connecting them with the therapeutic results that we're desperately needing today. And so I'm intrigued by something like, you mentioned a couple of peptides, and FDA right now is knocking peptides off the market as fast as they can. They just removed, I think it was 32 peptides just got removed from the market in December. So the FDA is
22.
Was it 22?
Yeah.
Yeah, sweeping the decks clean, trying to get these things off the market. And so when you see a peptide that works, that's actually doing something, cool technology, cool discovery, lots of potential. FDA's, for whatever rationale that they've got, they're trying to push these things out of the therapeutic environment, perhaps because they become root solutions. And one thing that you can imagine that would be disruptive about the peptide industry is you do the 3 or 4 treatments over a course of a few months, and then you've achieved a result, and you don't need daily, dosing, and you've actually reset the biology to a younger age, and you go live for years without having to repeat that pattern necessarily. So it's disruptive to think that you can reset your biology. And then you get into these ancient wisdoms and you find out, oh my gosh, we've been divorced from long practices that every day we're resetting our biology, every day getting rid of senescent kind of dying cells and allowing us to reinvigorate stem cell activity and all that. One of my great examples of this is Dr. Blackburn, who won the Nobel Prize for telomerase, which is the enzyme that builds telomeres on the ends of our genes to kind of create this kind of ever-present capacity, continue cell replication and rebirth. She was being paid many, many millions of dollars in her labs to figure out a drug that would turn on telomerase. In the end, she made an extraordinary discovery that spiritual song and chant of every variety that she could find was turning on telomerase. And so she went to Black Baptist choirs in the South. She went to shamanic practices down in South America. She went to all over the world and found that every time a spiritual song, chant, or practice was put into place, especially around traditional environments of a fire at night, stem cells were turning on, telomerase was turning on, regeneration was happening at the cellular level. And so the last few years of my life, I'm starting to realize, yes, we put lots of toxins in the environment. Yes, we've screwed up our relationship to soil, but compounding the crisis that has unfolded from that is decades or centuries before adding the toxins, we lost the daily practices that put us in right relationship with our regenerative qualities. So Dr. Lee, I'm going to shift to Bridget, but we're going to come back to you in just a few minutes and think about the pineal gland, which is another one of your passions. So I'm going to cycle back to you here. But Bridget, you are in that indigenous practices space. You are practicing a nutrition science that's 9,000 years old at least. And so give us a little bit of perspective on how did you stumble into this part of your career? Because you used to make films and all kinds of other things, not nutrition. So your winding path and what gets you passionate about it today.
Yeah, I would love to talk about that. So growing up and in my early career, I would say I was really what they would say, we'll call like in your head. I was an attorney. I studied a lot. I was reacting to my environment. My body was working pretty well, but not great. Looking back now at what I've discovered about, how it can work. But really everything was kind of thought-based. And as I started progressing into my career, having my family, things like that, I had a lot of stress. Even though I was pretty young and healthy, things were starting to break down a little bit, and I was really having a hard time relaxing. And yeah, there were factors that were stressful that came up in my life, but I had no way of managing them. And I was really lucky to stumble upon yoga at that time. And I started working into my breath. That was really the first step for me. That was the first time, I had exercised before that, but it was kind of like, get it done so you can check that off and move on to the next class. Yoga changed everything for me, and I was able to finally calm down and learn how to control through my breath and body together, how I was feeling and what was really going on in every other aspect of my life. So that became kind of like a little side benefit. I was still in my regular career and having kids and moving around to different cities and things like that quite a bit. But yoga was something I started practicing, you know, like at first once a week, kind of like at the gym, and then more and more became a daily practice. I started practicing, you know, a regular yoga method and breath work, and slowly my life started to shift. I mean, this was like over a very long period of time, and that's what they say about these practices. It's not like a, you know, today I have the list of this is my yoga practice and now I do it. It's a little bit subtle. So it was kind of a long time before it really like became something that I could even imagine would be my career. But over time it did become that. And Ayurveda, which is the sister method for healing that goes right along with yoga, same kind of like they both come from ancient times in India, and they both heal the body, mind, and spirit. And Ayurveda, I was just introduced to it through yoga very slowly. I got really interested in it when my daughter had severe food allergies from the time she was born. And so once that happened, I was just very interested in like, how can we address this? You know, we use Western medicine for sure. And then we also were learning about these kind of like ancient principles around health and healing. And I started studying it myself and then just became more and more involved in educating other people about it. So that's how I got interested. I think the thing that really sets Ayurveda apart from the way that we think about things in the West, usually in terms of nutrition and life balance methods and habits in general, because that's really what it is that it's very individualized, and everything is, the answer is kind of like, it depends. Like, is more sleep good? And broccoli, yeah, probably, but it depends. You know, should we decrease animal proteins? I mean, maybe, but it depends. Like every single thing is, it depends. And let's look at the individual person and their constitution and very gently unfold the life story that has taken an individual from as they were created to where they are now. And very gently kind of like untangling the roots that develop between who we really are and who we become in life. So that's what I do. That's how I got interested. I hope that answers that.
Beautiful. Give us a little bit of an overview of what Ayurvedic nutrition is and how it differs from kind of the battlegrounds of what we usually think about nutrition, paleo versus keto versus vegan versus, you know, all of those. What is the approach that's so unique there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it again goes back to, it depends. So they all make sense for, they've come about because they worked for somebody in some situation, probably, you know, most diet trends or philosophies on nutrition. And what Ayurveda would say is like, let me just go back to the word Ayurveda and what it means. It means life knowledge. So it's knowing your own life. So when you know yourself, and you can kind of like put that into descriptive elements, and when you've studied that, then you can predict how things will come at you. So keto diet for an individual person on a certain path during a certain season, living in a certain climate, having a certain response to symptoms, that might be a great choice, and it might not be a permanent great choice. But that person's next door neighbor might have a completely different path, and that would not be the right choice for them. So what Ayurveda would always say is, it depends. Everything that exists is there, and it can be a benefit or put you into disharmony. So it really always depends on knowing yourself, beginning to take daily habits and practices that establish firmer trust in your own knowing of what is right for you, and understanding how to balance yourself with everything you're taking in. So that's nutrition and diet and choices about food, but also you're digesting every single thing that is coming into your body. So all your senses are also digesting things. They are transforming what's coming into you into what you're going to use it for, and then hopefully getting rid of what you don't need. And so that's what we want our digestion to do. And that's also what we want to do when we're digesting things through our senses. We want to be able to take in things, use them in our cells, in our bodies, in our output in a helpful way, and then get rid of what we don't want on ourselves anymore. So it's very unique and gentle and it's like, you know, in yourself, and like maybe an Ayurvedic practitioner can help you kind of like identify those things or like hear your life story and process it. But it's very unique.
I love it. One thing that was amazed by when I first discovered it and then watched you apply it in our clinic over the years to so many patients was the nuance of the energies within the food that go beyond just calories. And so I had been taught, and Dr. Lee and I had both been taught a very reductionist approach to nutrition, which is here's how many calories, here's how much fat, here's how much carbohydrate, here's how much protein, and that was about it. And and innovation was low salt, or whatever it is. Like we just were taught so little about it. And in that context, I started to practice nutrition medicine at the University of Virginia in 2008. I tried to start a nutrition center for reversing chronic disease through a plant-based diet. And the university ended up shutting that. It was actually the dietitians that shut that down because it didn't fit into the food pyramid that was being practiced at the university and all that. And so ended up leaving to start the nutrition center, started 40 years of science that had come out of Cornell and Columbia, these incredible universities, as well as incredible amounts of science showing that a plant-based diet could reverse chronic disease. And I was applying that broadly to every single patient like a prescription. Here's the diet, here's the thing, how do you do it, here's your breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And 30% of people seem to just thrive. Diabetes would melt away because they eliminate the inflammatory proteins, they eliminated the inflammatory oils in their diet, and boom, diabetes goes away, their mood's back, everything. And a third of them would be like, maybe a little better, maybe not. And then a third of them would actually get worse. And then it would take this huge, long effort to figure out, what do we need to tweak? What do we need to do? And then we find Ayurveda and find out with a single questionnaire, you immediately take a completely different look at the individual instead of their food and ask that question. This individual, what is their constitution? What is that constitution looking for in the environment to augment its strengths and its weaknesses to become, a holistic system? And so that got really intriguing to me, that a vegan diet, yes, works for everybody if you know what their constitution is and you tailor the nutrients within a vegan diet back to that individual. Keto, great, it works for 30%, 30%, 30%. But if you figure out what the constitution is, then a keto diet can work for everybody. And so that was the cool thing for me, is like, yeah, of course, we're omnivores ultimately. We use carbohydrates and fats interchangeably to release sunlight within our cells at the mitochondrial level. And so it's really finding that right relationship back that you really have demonstrated in spades. So a little bit of reflection, or maybe just a primer real quick on how does that actually happen? How does somebody listening who's never heard of Ayurveda get engaged with that information and discover themselves?
So what we do, is first talk about life story. So like the first step is always to like stop and go, okay, let me identify what I was like when I was created. Like, what is it about me that is unchangeable, And then what's the whole story of how I got to where I am? And I mean, it seems kind of obvious, like we all kind of know that, but we very rarely stop and reflect on that and talk about it with another person. So that's where we start. And then what we do is quantify. We have, basically Ayurveda, what we do is break down the elements of nature and say, like everything that exists is made up of earth, water, fire, air, and ether. And then taking from those, we have these different doshas, and they're Vata, Pitta, Kapha. So if you start to learn about Ayurveda, you'll learn that, there's these three doshas that are kind of like types that people are, but they're actually types that everything is. So like we have doshas ourselves, which are translated as like imbalances, but they're basically like how we quantify where we are now. And we use these elements of nature to say, okay, like based on my whole life story and these elements of nature, I have a lot of pitta happening, is how we would look at it and like give an assessment. But so, foods have doshas or, combinations of these qualities of nature. And so do relationships and a table and what you're wearing, you know, like so everything has these ways that we can like quantify how they are, and then we do too. And what we do is we decide, okay, based on what we know and what your medical doctor has said, you know, what's our understanding of where you are now versus who you started out as, and maybe somewhere along the line on that path there became something that was out of balance. Maybe that's what created the symptoms that you have, you know, whether it's diabetes or another metabolism issue or anything else that's going on. And we just try to unwind that and start to say, okay, well, I have these qualities, perhaps because I'm this way, I have more vulnerabilities in this direction, or I have more ability in this direction. But maybe that I can identify where the imbalance started. And then what we do is just start to kind of like heal that by slowly bringing in the foods that are balancing for our unique situation, basically. So when we look at certain disease states or symptoms that are happening, we can usually say like, okay, well, a lot of people that are struggling with type 2 diabetes, for instance, may have a kapha imbalance where that's higher, more earth and water than the other elements. And so for a lot of people, we would probably look at how to heal that. But for every single person, it would be a different combination of things that brought them to where they are. So it really would depend on the individual.
Beautiful. We'll be getting to more Q&A in a bit, but you know, one of the questions that is popping through here pretty frequently is the difference between type 2, type 1, and you know, and ultimately, you know, autoimmune diseases as a whole perhaps being worthwhile to put in. And this description that you have here of Ayurveda that I really loved as you took us through that initial kind of your career and what kind of took you into this, and you described that slow journey into self, that slow journey into self-discovery ultimately. And I would say that is pretty much my experience over now 30-year career in medicine, and you know, all these indigenous cultural experiences I've had now, is life is really a journey of being born completely you being deprogrammed from self, and you taking a long journey back to self, and then you die. And so that is what I got to see in endocrinology, metabolism, and then subsequently my hospice and palliative care. My career started in birthing babies in the Philippines. So from birth to the endocrine metabolic decline of humanity to this rebirth process at the end of life. So I got to see it over and over and over and over again, this process of self-discovery. Type 1 diabetes that Dr. Lee was mentioning and many of you are asking about is an autoimmune condition. Autoimmune is a description of your immune system attacking self, autoimmune. So that self-immunity where you become the problem is a journey that the entire population of the world is on. And to put this in context of the obesity and type 2 diabetes phenomenon, it happened about a decade later. And so obesity emerges in the 1980s after we start poisoning the mitochondrial potential of life here. Fast forward to the diabetes epidemic towards the end of the 80s, suddenly pre-diabetes, diabetes starting to become aware. The early 90s sets in and we start doubling down on the amount of glyphosate put into our environment because we started using it as a desiccant in 1992, spraying wheat and other grains and legumes with this chemical right before harvest, which meant the food had very high concentrations. You were no longer treating weeds with it. You were spraying the actual food with this chemical for the first time in 1992. And suddenly wheat made us allergic, not only to wheat, it also made us self-allergic. And so the autoimmune disease of celiac disease triggered by wheat exposure wasn't a wheat problem, it was a glyphosate problem in the wheat. And we've peer-reviewed published this science almost 8 years ago now through our lab and everything. But it's phenomenal to realize that gluten isn't really toxic to the cell until you add glyphosate, and then you have this massive compounding effect on leaky gut. As you lose the gut barrier, your immune system gets overwhelmed with exposures every day. Ultimately, you are going to self-react with all of that food fight that's going on every single day as the chemicals dissolve that barrier between the outside world and your immune system. That overwhelming immune stimulation, suddenly there's an opportunity for a cross reaction, and some antibody that you were making to what looked like an outside experience cross reacts with the beta islet cell in your pancreas, and you've got type 1 diabetes. reacts with the tissue in your joint, and suddenly you have rheumatoid arthritis. Reacts to the melatonin in your skin, and suddenly you have vitiligo, or the elimination of pigment in some areas of your skin. You suddenly cross reacts to a protein in your hair follicle, and you've got alopecia, or autoimmune hair loss. And so these autoimmune conditions started going bonkers in our environment, thyroid being the most common one. Dr. Lee and I manage thyroid even more commonly than diabetes in our clinics as endocrinologists. 1 in 4 young girls in the United States by age 12, 1 in 4 girls had antibodies to her thyroid gland by 2012. And so 25% of our young girls already with self-destruction antibodies to their thyroid by age 12 was a devastating phenomenon that we created between basically 1992 and 2012, and that 20-year period. And so you can see this interesting phenomenon that first you lose the lights, the metabolism, you dim, and with prolonged dimness, you can't repair protein structures, and so you get continued dysfunction. And as a next iteration of dysfunction or dis-ease is your own attack of self. And so this loss of self-identity at the cellular level, there's lots of questions coming through around type 1 diabetes being triggered by immune reactions. And the pandemic was certainly one of them, that suddenly we saw this huge uptick in autoimmunity, not just from the virus, but also from our interventions, the vaccines and all this. So anytime we tinker with the immune system's relationship to the outside world, we seem to upregulate this loss of self and self-identity at the cellular level. And so Ayurveda is this incredible journey that has served our clinic for so many years, but served humanity for 9,000, of a reintroduction to self, which is a daily necessary practice. And this is where meditation, mindfulness, yoga, all these things have become so vigorously pursued in our communities, because there's this deep sense of loss of self occurring within the public environment. And I think it's a loss of those lifestyle practices that kept us connected, and an increase in the toxins and poisons that disconnected us from self at the cellular level. And so this takes us, Dr. Lee, into the topic of the pineal gland. The pineal gland is one of the most mysterious structures in the body, does not seem to function as any sort of normal gland would, is famous for melanin or melatonin, but also, is recently recognized to be involved in some other processes. And you've gotten pretty passionate about this topic of the pineal gland. So give us a little perspective there.
Yeah, so the pineal gland actually was researched heavily by a Russian group, Dr. Kavasin, and I had the privilege to get to speak to him. And he has published so much on basically peptides from the pineal gland, but he has shown, although some of the studies are published in Russian, that using one of the peptides from the pineal gland, epithalin, increases longevity in animals and also in humans. So he's has published a study that was 15 years long on humans, and half the group got epithalin, half the group did not. The pineal gland secretes epithalin, and also it secretes melatonin, which is also a hormone. And anyway, his study is like really amazing, because it shows that the group that took epithalin, the human groups, basically lived longer, had a lower mortality rate, less cancer, less heart disease, and less stroke. So it comes to back like, how can epithalin help with type 2 diabetes? Because I know there's like questions like, when are you going to talk about type 2 diabetes? So it's, if you could show the 3 slides, there's 3 slides I like to show. One's a cell cycle. So there's the cell cycle. So all our cells can self-replicate. So if you want new skin cells, your old skin cells die off, and then you can generate a new skin cell. This cell cycle starts at G1, and then S is like DNA synthesis, and G2 is basically preparation for the cell to self-replicate, which is the M for mitosis. So you can get a brand new cell. So the problem is that as we age, we get stuck in this phase called the circle G2. And the problem is that we need our cells to self-replicate. We can't replicate forever, because if you can self-replicate forever, you have discovered immortality. But epithalin is a peptide. It's a very small 3 amino acid peptide that it's one of the few peptides that can interact to our DNA, and it can turn on our DNA to make certain proteins or turn off some bad genes like cancer genes. So epithalin also controls cell cycle. So this is key. It's a universal peptide found in not only in animals and invertebrates and amphibians, but it's also found in humans. So this is all natural. So they studied something called basically a bovine pineal gland, and they call it epithalamin, but the active part of it is called epithalin. So the next slide here is what I show to all my patients is that your cell, or let's say you're type 2 diabetic or pre-diabetic, or you have renal insufficiency, or you have heart failure, it's like your cells are stuck in mud. It's like a tire stuck in this thick mud. And you're basically, you can sprinkle all the nutritional supplements there, medications, just to make this tire go better in the mud. And the problem is when you're stuck in G2, you accumulate these bad cells called, I call it zombie cells or senescent cells. So if you can accumulate a lot of zombie cells, you have a lot of inflammation that destroys your normal cells. And then your immune system cannot get rid of it. We call it apoptosis. You want to get rid of these bad cells, but your body gets resistant to it. And then you get accumulation of all these zombie cells. So you have two pathways. You can go organ dysfunction and you get cancer. And as we age, you lose that peptide called epithalin. And but if you get epithalin, next slide, what you see is you get a brand new tire. So this is the whole concept in medicine. This is the paradigm shift. You can go conventional and you can basically work with organ dysfunction, or you can try to use epithalin and get a brand new cell. So the pineal gland is something that gets calcified as we age. And I know you can do yoga and different movements and that may help. But the thing is that there's going to be a point where you're going to need epithalin. And epithalin is basically what we use is a peptide that this is what Dr. Cavison uses, and it's an injection. So you do an injection with an insulin syringe, and you basically give 50 milligrams, or sorry, 50 units on the insulin syringe. So that's 5 milligrams, and you do it daily for 10 shots. So you get a total dose of 50 milligrams, and you repeat every 6 months. What I'm seeing in some of my diabetics that are on insulin, they can get off some of their medications. And what's interesting is they're reversing their type 2 diabetes. There are other anecdotal data from other doctors that people, they're seeing children with pancreatic insufficiency. And he has used epithalin, and basically it has restored their pancreatic function in majority of those teenage kids. I'm doing some studies with, I just saw a patient today. He's a retired physician. He has renal insufficiency, and we're using epithalin instead of every 6 months. We're doing it every 3 months. And his creatinine went from 2.1 now to 1.9. To me, that's huge difference. So hopefully, as he continues to use epithalin, his creatinine will also improve. Now, you may not see an improvement of creatinine right away, but give it 6 to 9 months and you should see improvement. You're really generating a new cell, a new kidney cell, new pancreatic cell. So most of the things with type 2 diabetes is really, you have to basically you have to monitor your blood sugar, because I saw a lot of questions about continuous glucose sensors. So the ones that I like is either Dexcom, they have the Dexcom 7, or use the Freestyle Libre 3. And I've been using a lot of Freestyle Libre 3 sensors, and it's for pre-diabetics. It's really educational. Usually my patients said that's the most amazing thing. You put on a little sensor on your arm, and you can you get the app on your phone, and it will automatically, as long as you turn the app, you'll see your blood sugar. So this is something to empower your patients, or just empower everyone that's listening here. If you have like type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes, what you can do is get a continuous glucose sensor. And my wife noticed like 30 minutes after she eats, her blood sugar can shoot up. She has pre-diabetes too, to about 170, 180, which is not good, sometimes up to 200 if she has carbs, like too much rice. So she will try to do this. She will walk within 15 minutes after dinner, because it takes about 30 minutes before glucose spikes. And then once glucose spikes, insulin spikes. And once insulin spikes, you're going to gain a lot of weight. Insulin will make anyone fatter. So if you have too much insulin, we call this insulin resistance, you're going to have a lot of problems with central obesity. Your visceral fat will increase. It's a precursor of cancer and many other diseases. So the thing is that if you can lower insulin by just simply walking, this is one of the things. My wife just basically walks 15 minutes after dinner. She'll walk either 1 mile to 4 miles, and she'll do a brisk walk. And she doesn't want to go to the gym. And this is something that you could do, whether you walk or have elliptical, or you do a rowing or stationary bike. You could do this at home. It doesn't cost. You just need to do something to get that heart rate up. You gotta stress the body a little, drive that glucose into your muscle to prevent that insulin spike, and you will lose weight, because a lot of people struggle with weight, because I hear this all day long. And in addition, they're trying to reverse their pre-diabetes or their type 2 diabetes. So exercise is key. You got to move. It's not just in theory. You have to sweat a little. You have to get that heart rate up. And the other thing is basically do some intermittent fasting. Women who tend to have menstrual cycles, there's a phenomenal book. It's Fast Like a Girl, F-A-S-T, Fast Like a Girl. And they tell you basically a week before your menstrual cycle, do not fast. But she gives you the criteria on how to fast and all that. For guys, we don't have menstrual cycles. I've been incorporating this, is that I try to eat from 11 a.m. to basically 7 p.m. and not to snack afterwards. I'm a snacker. I get stressed out. I tend to snack a lot. If I have a paper or a presentation I have to do, I tend to snack. But if lately I've been behaving myself, so from 11 to 7 p.m., you just need really 2 meals a day. We don't need to eat 3 meals a day. And once in a while, you should try to fast 24 hours. Now, if you're a type 1 diabetic, you still need insulin, but probably less. You need a basal rate. You can't forget your long-acting insulin, or else you're going to DKA. Before insulin was discovered, that's what they did to their children. They would lock them up in the bedroom because the insulin was not discovered, and they basically starved their kids to death. Otherwise, if they would just start eating, they're going to go into DKA and they're going to die rapidly. So before insulin, it was impossible to treat type 1 diabetes. It was sad to see you're really starving your loved one, but that was the only way to keep them alive. But now we have all these fancy insulins and all that. So, but I try to, for a lot of my patients, I say, look, we can get your blood sugars down with different medicines and all that, but let's try to use this peptide epithalin from the pineal gland. And anyway, it also comes, you can get it nasal spray. Dr. Kaffison has a spray, actually a spray that you can get, the Kaffison peptide, so you can get that way. It's less expensive than the injection. And hopefully the FDA doesn't get rid of epithalin, because epithalin has been shown by the Russians. They've done tons of study in humans, and it's amazing, because one of the studies that's amazing is it can restore your melatonin production. It turns on 3 genes to turn on melatonin production. For me, I was struggling with sleep, and I've been on melatonin for about 15 years, higher and higher doses, up to 30 milligrams of melatonin a night. And with epithalin, about the 3rd year into it, I just stopped using melatonin. And my wife one day asked, how come you're not using it? Because it's like, I don't need it, because I could sleep now without it. So it's interesting. Epithalin can help the pineal gland work even better. So, but you cannot expect it to self-replicate forever, because they've done studies on fetal lung cells to see how many times it can self-replicate. and you will probably get 25%, and after that, it stops. So epithalin is a great bridge to generate new cells, and it's all about getting out of G2 to self-replicate. So that's the story I want to tell you about a different concept on looking at pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes.
Perfect. I think that's such an important place to end. And again, with this concept of technology gives us windows into nature. And what we find again and again, that technology never replaces nature. And in its best ways, it gives us windows into understanding the relationships that we have. And the thing that I'm so intrigued about epithalin is that it's taking us to the pineal gland. And the pineal gland is the one gland we are not taught about in as endocrinologists. We're taught about
exactly.
Pituitary gland, and all this other stuff. Pineal does not get mentioned anywhere. And it's like the hush hush secret of like, well, there is a pineal gland that looks like a freaking pine cone at the base of your brain, and light somehow interacts with that gland more than any other element in the entire body. This is our gland that puts us into right relationship with light, sunlight, light within us, the metabolic rate within us. All of that seems to be coding from this thing. And ultimately, as to Bridget's point, Ayurveda is taking us back into right relationship with self. And every meditation and mindfulness practice of the last few thousand years has recognized that the pineal gland is an innate relationship to your understanding of self. And so it's often called the God hormone environment, or the God gland. And it's this concept of this is the force of life coming into right relationship with biology as a projection of whatever light is and information stream is coming through the pineal gland. And as we age, we tend to calcify the pineal gland, which decreases its crystal structure. A liquid crystal in a radio bounces around so that you can get the right station tuned in. When you calcify the crystal, it cannot resonate or vibrate to the original self frequency, and you start to literally decay the sense of self at that core level, is my belief. And so this is fascinating to me because, again, we mentioned it with you, Bridget. Yoga has mudras, or these body positions that have been long recognized to decalcify the pineal gland. And so reversing the aging process, not for the purpose of living, healthy without wrinkles, but for the purpose of knowing self. And so give us a little perspective that you might have on that kind of journey into self that you've seen through Ayurveda, and what are some of the other elements outside of maybe yoga that you would point to?
Yeah, well, I'm just really excited about this study of, I've heard of the pineal gland, and I see it as connected to the body, and that we have these chakra energy centers within yoga that we're trying to open up and all of this, but just the physical relationship to light. There's a whole part of Ayurveda called Jyotish that just talks about a relationship to light. And that was, I won't get into like astrology and all these things that you could have different belief systems about all of that, but what that really comes down to is understanding like that we want to be aware of when it gets light out and when it goes dark. We want to be experiencing that, and that has a great effect on the body. So just that, a lot of us have light practices where we get up in the morning and allow the sun to hit our eyes, and we see the benefit in like starting the melatonin working correctly and all of these things. But what about the nighttime? Like a lot of us are not experiencing nighttime at all. We go into our house, we turn on the light and go to bed and make it dark, but we're not really going outside and seeing the stars and having the impact of that. And I think that practice alone is really beneficial to our nervous system and our bodies. And, I can't really break it down to science because that's not my specialty, but I can say that's one of the life practices that we've known for a long time helps us feel more natural in our bodies. Yeah, yoga positions for sure. We're reminding ourselves we have control over how to open up our channels for breathing, how to make sure that we're not having some tendency in our body that's stopping the ability of our body to take in through our senses what it's meant to. Taking a few moments, and it doesn't have to be some really long yoga practice, but just this is something I work on with clients all the time, like in order to bring yoga postures and meditation, and we don't have to like revamp our entire life. We can just take a couple minutes every day to go, oh yeah, that's who I am. This is how my body goes. This is how I'm feeling. This is my connection to nature. Move on. We don't even have to dedicate that much time to it, but it can have a tremendous, tremendous effect. So I would say, you know, these ancient methods for systemizing how we look at ourselves and how we look at our day very much support all of the science that I'm so glad is now coming through to support all of these methods that are just kind of known to help.
Love that. I love that. A couple other things that come to mind as you're talking there is a reminder of Qigong. On our journey of intrinsic health that you helped me craft, there's an 8-week journey into the right relationship with food, breath, water, movement, fasting, etc. And so we were basically trying to distill down, 15 years of medical science in our clinics and clinical experience. How do we put that into practice and then allow you to discover yourself within those? And that's really the key. Is there's no nutrition that heals you. There is nutrition that can put you into relationship with yourself, and then you heal. And so that's kind of the journey of intrinsic health has been working on over and over again. Is we often as medical practitioners will give you a solution outside of yourself, a drug, a technology, a thing, and that can temporize your symptoms. It can make you, perhaps regress to a previous state of less disease, but it doesn't create the solution, which is you ultimately. And so the journey of intrinsic health was what we ended up developing, realizing that all health comes from within, a reconnection here. So if you reach outside yourself for technology, you need to remember, like Dr. Lee was saying, this is a bridge. You can't rely on some peptide to keep injecting every 6 months and you expect yourself to just get healthier and healthier and healthier and healthier. It can give you a deeper reserve for a moment so that you can go in pursuit of that self in a direct relationship to you. So that would be kind of an exciting thing. And one of the modalities we use in that journey, to get back to your light thing, is Qigong. William Vitalis in our clinic was our main practitioner there. But some incredible endocrine science has been done around the Qigong masters. And what they've been able to show is that those that train themselves into something called light gazing, they stare into the morning sun as it rises, and they train their eye and their body to be able to handle longer and longer and brighter exposures to that sun. For me, when I watch sunrise, I can watch it easily as the sun comes up out of the horizon. It's in those deep oranges and reds, but as soon as it starts to go into the yellows and whites, I can't look at it. It's too bright. These guys can train themselves to look straight into that rising sun for a couple of hours. And in that, they've been able to show, in studying these people in complete fasting states, they never go into a fasting biology. And so they are literally liberating energy straight through their retina, straight through their skin perhaps as well, and probably interacting with that relationship to the pineal gland, direct sunshine into metabolism, into metabolic energetic potential. And the other thing that we've seen this happen through is in our science lab around the soil science. So we're extracting nutrients and these carbon molecules from fossil soils that humans have never seen before. These are 55 million year old soil systems. And when we put that back into human systems, one of the very first things that happen is the mitochondrial metabolism leaps. You get about a 15 to 30% increase in ATP production. And that mitochondrial membrane, kind of like he was describing, becomes more elastic, and you start to get this accelerated production of energy with no calories. And so both the sunlight and the intelligence of microbial soil systems are able to connect you to a higher level of capacity to liberate energy without new calories in the system. And so I'm intrigued by, again, Ayurveda, which says there's earth elements, there's sun elements, there's fire, there's water. We are ultimately made of the elements, and our body has a deeper intelligence on how to turn those elements literally into energy for our capacity to thrive. And so Ayurveda is tuning us into these different elements within our bodies, and then putting us into a relationship with a food system that emphasizes that which we might be missing, supporting those in which we are strong. And so I'm very much loving this whole experience of the elements are ultimately the nature that is what life comes out of. No surprise, by dialing back into nature, we get back that metabolic capacity to reverse the obesity, diabetes alike. one of the questions that is here that I think as we turn to the Q&A, all of you, thank you for joining us. It's still got 1.6K of you, all 1,600 of you listening, and many thousands that'll listen to the recording here. We appreciate your participation in these over the years, because it's really made this an incredibly rich database. And so you can go to the other global health education summits. We have over 30 hours of content on issues from the viruses and the pandemic and the immune system to autoimmune conditions, cardiovascular disease. We take a look at a cancer through a different lens, all of that. But with this one, I'm intrigued by one of these questions that's come through from the audience here. And I'm going to turn this to you, Bridget, first, but it asks, what is the effect of trauma or stress on metabolism and diabetes? And you spoke to this a little bit before the call.
Gosh, the effect is huge. It could be anything, really. I mean, so again, we're born, we have a makeup that comes to us from our ancestors, right? And so we can look at that through science, or we can look at it through ancient thinking, whatever it is. We're born, we have this way, these vulnerabilities and beauties that make us ourselves. And then we're carrying stresses, ancestral stresses, and all kinds of things that make it into our DNA, right? And then we start our life journey, and then more and more things happen to us, and we make more and more decisions. And so stresses and traumas and beauty and goodness and, you know, all the things that happen in a life come onto us, and we're processing them in all different ways. So we sometimes we can take that in, and our bodies, you know, we have a really supportive family and we live in a place, you know, there's some reason why that can come in, and we can process it in a certain way, where someone else might have a very different experience with that, with something that happens to them. So
there's a question here that is in sister to that, which is around I'm eating super healthy, and yet my hemoglobin A1C is going up. And so you've done a good job with our patients and over the years of helping them realize it's not the perfect equation. You can do your Ayurvedic thing to the nth degree, but it's deeper than that, of this deeper relationship to the food or the other stressors in there. So speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so first I would say eating healthy, that could mean a lot of different things for that individual person. And so what we would look at is like, what does healthy mean for that person in that situation? And based on, you know, a whole combination of what someone is dealing with, one choice or another might be the right direction. Something might be more appetizing to that person, and they really need the calories that day, and they need to keep their energy up. So they're going to make a different choice than someone else. Okay. And so there's not really a good or bad food here. It's like, am I feeling like I've over accumulated or that I'm depleted? What is my body telling me right now? So yes, sometimes we can have a healthy diet, and for all different kinds of reasons, it's not working right then, or maybe it's something other than diet that we need to address first, like taking stop and rest and evaluating, what have I been through? Can I take a moment or 3 years to rest from that before I go on this building a healthy diet, whatever that means, you know, like, I would say, yeah, those things may go up, and it's just going to depend on the person. So yeah, we can take, as far as what foods we want to eat and which ones are healthy, like we know that like complex carbohydrates and some plant fibers and certain amount of protein and things like that from unprocessed foods that are not touched by pesticides, like those are the ideal things. But like, if that feels too restrictive for a certain person's lifestyle or life experiences, like maybe they just need to get some calories that day, or someone else, you know, maybe is ready to do a fast. And as Dr. Lee pointed out, you know, maybe someone in a certain state of female reproduction or their period or something like that, it's not right. So all of it just depends. And I don't mean that in a way that's like not answering what to do. Instead, it's like, with grace, acknowledge that we're all just trying to make the best choice every day that we can. And we want to be really loving about why we may even know what to do, and then not do it. Like, we want to love that part of ourselves so much that we're nourishing ourselves so that the things that we don't need drop away.
I think that's been, one of the missed themes as we talk about nutrition is this topic of love within it. There's some interesting science that just came out of Ohio. They were looking at the effects of herbicides and pesticides on cancer and other phenomenon. And so they had a rabbit model where they had these families of rabbits that were reproducing, and they were giving higher and higher doses of herbicide and pesticide within their food system to show the downstream consequences. And the rabbits were randomized to different levels of toxicity over a couple generations. And there was one cohort that just was at the highest level of toxicity, really, that they were exposing to, and it wasn't having any disease manifested. And this whole study finished, and they went back and were trying to figure out, why did this one cohort just absolutely not fit? Did we screw up something? So they were interviewing the technician in the lab that was actually giving the animals the food, and they were trying to figure out what was going on. He said, well, I'm giving this much and this thing, and everything seemed right. And they're like, well, can you show us how you do it? It's like, well, yeah, sure, I do it. I bring the animals out, and I'm a huge fan of rabbits. I love rabbits so much. And so I will pet them for a little bit, and I'll tell them how much I love them and how beautiful they are, and then I feed them. And it turned out that it was him sitting there before feeding these animals some of the most potent toxins that they could consume, telling them how much they were loved, how beautiful they are, and he completely ameliorated the effect of the carcinogens in the food by loving those animals. And so what I've seen you do with our patients is really this, is remind us, do not fear the thing, do not change your diet for the thing. Put the love back into the food that you're feeding, and you will have a completely different result. And Americans listening to this, 1/3 of your meals are consumed alone behind a steering wheel. 1/3 of the meals consumed in America alone behind a steering wheel. And so this is a reminder to you that love has been fundamentally eliminated from your experience. And the blue zones around the world, where everybody seems to live over 100 years, the one thing we haven't been able to find in the blue zones is a common nutrition. They all eat different things. Some of them eat super healthy. Some of them seem to live in the most toxic environments. One of the longest lived communities in China lives literally in one of the biggest wastelands of mining and municipal waste that you can imagine, highest air pollution levels, everything, and yet they're living over 100 years. What they have found in common in the blue zones is they are sharing meals in love. And so the classic line from the Ikaria, Greece, a couple that taught me this was, in Ikaria, we never ask each other, what did you eat last night? But we always ask, who did you eat with last night? And we always set an extra place at the dinner table, hoping somebody we've never met shows up to share our meal with us. That's the attitude that overcomes all toxicity in the food environment. And so all of you listening, I want you to begin at this new concept of the pineal gland is a right relationship to self. We divorce ourselves of that over time. The position in yoga that has been recognized to clarify that decalcify that gland, but in anything else, child's pose. Literally the easiest pose in all of yoga is a gentle bow, kneeling with your forehead on the ground. Do that on soil rather than on a plastic yoga mat, and you ground this third eye, this spot of your head, and it decalcifies the pineal gland that sits straight behind that. And so being in reverence in a bow position with your forehead on the ground decalcifies the gland, puts you in right relationship to self so that you can get up and share a meal with somebody you don't know and bake that with love, and you're going to have a completely different result. And so, Dr. Lee, as we think about the profound nature of everything we do here, tell me a little bit about your journey as a doctor now, and how we can think about engaging. Your clinic is exploring many different things, and you are working with a group of nurse practitioners that still have openings in their clinic. So a little bit of journey as to how, as we find passion for life, can we engage technology to discover reserves within us, and how would we do that through your clinic?
Thanks, Zach. So currently my practice is filled. I've been in, there's only one of me, and I see like 3 generations of patients in my practice. So, I mean, sometimes I'll open the door occasionally, but you can sign up for a waiting list. But I do have 2 nurse practitioners And one is, her name's Morgan, and she'll first visit will be free for 30 minutes. If you like her and you feel she's competent, you can follow up with Morgan. And the other one's Becky. She's been doing functional medicine for over 20 plus years, probably 30 years. And she doesn't even have a TV in her house, and she just reads and she presents, and she's really on top of, she does a lot of difficult cases, and she likes challenging cases. So her name's Becky Murray. So if you go to dredwinlee.com, you can find that information, contact information. So one thing that I've noticed, there's some questions, and if you could put up, Jackie, the slide 28, what are the nutritional supplements you can use to help with to help your blood sugars? Some of the top things here is like chromium has a lot of great data. Magnesium has great data. EPA, DHA, which is omega-3, can also help. Cinnamon can also help. Alpha-lipoic acid, CoQ10. So this list here, they all have clinical data to basically help improve your beta cells to work better. Next slide, I have just another slide here, is something really interesting. It's called CaloCurb. And this was discovered in New Zealand, and they were actually isolated the bitter receptor from the small intestine, because thousands of years ago, the Romans and the Greeks, if they wanted to lose weight, they would eat bitters. And I don't even know what a bitter is, but somehow it's been documented in many different cultures. Eating bitters can help you lose weight. But no one knew where the bitter receptor was, so they actually spent a lot of money, and they found it in the small intestine. So they were looking at what natural thing can actually stimulate this bitter receptor, and they found this herb, and it actually stimulates GLP-1, which is a now everyone has heard of semaglutide or Ozempic, but this is your own GLP-1, and it can turn off your hunger site there, and also help lower blood sugars if your blood sugars are high. And it also stimulates another peptide called CCK to reduce hunger. So they've shown data that it can reduce calories up to 20%. It's all natural, plant-based. You can get it on, I think, on Amazon. Take 1 to 2 pills 1 hour before lunch and before dinner. So if you do intermittent fasting, 2 meals a day, I think this is, you need a little help to help with the hunger, consider using CaloCurb. So, so you can, that's it with the slides there. The thing that I've really been intrigued is heart rate variability. And I actually been fascinated with this because I'm too stressed out, and I finally got these devices to measure my heart rate variability. And I realized I got to relax. I got to chill out. I got to meditate. So every morning I put the polar heart rate strap, and I have an app called Elite HRV. And every morning I do like 2 minutes of deep breathing and to get my baseline. And then I do another 2 minutes. Just so I do about 5 minutes of just deep breathing and trying to get my heart rate up. But the thing that I've been like encouraging my patients for over 25 years is a cold plunge. And before cold plunges, it's like just get a bucket of ice water, and when you're done with your shower, just put it on over your head. And you need a little stress in the body. So I'm fortunate. I'm really fortunate because in Florida, it's a little cold in the wintertime. And so I jump in my pool. And this morning was just like 63 degrees, not that cold, but I was there for 2 minutes. And then later measured my heart rate variability and improved. So stress the body a little, and you talk about sunlight, but cold exposure can also help. And you don't, for me, when I go in the water, it's just like just breathe in, breathe out, and trying to forget everything, and just because we're too stressed out as society. So we do need to meditate. And I totally agree with everything you guys are saying. We need time for ourselves and to love our family and our friends, and share meals with our loved ones and new ones. So
I love that list. That's fantastic. Bridget, what would you add to that? Anything else that practices that you would look to in your life or practice there?
Yeah, I mean, I think for everyone, we want to develop a food plan that makes sense for the individual person. We want to have meditation, some movement practice. I think one thing we didn't bring up today that I could go on for a long time about is creativity. How are we tapping into our creative flow every day, and remembering that as a vital essence of our health and well-being. People can reach out to me individually if they're interested in learning more about yoga or Ayurveda, and just take good care and look at your story and start to just develop a very small daily practice rather than a quick revamp of everything. That would be my number one thing I would say for everyone, whether you're on a path of prevention or you're dealing with an overwhelming state of health. We either way very gently look at the reality of who you are and love that somehow, and then start to unwind a healing practice towards that.
Beautiful. Incredible. Very good. I would add just a couple more things. I love every single element of this. I think we're really getting at the point here for everybody listening is, while we can probably pinpoint how the world became obese, diabetic, etc., the journey back to health is going to be nonlinear, and it's going to be full of many, many different opportunities. And I think that that's been my overwhelming experience in clinic. A lot of my clinic was dedicated to cancer management because that was my research and everything else. So in addition to the thyroid disease and the diabetes, cancer. And what I found is that as you start to open your life to the possibility that you've designed your perfect path back to self, every challenge becomes a gift rather than a disease. And so all of you listening, you are carrying some degree of relationship to obesity, metabolic collapse, diabetes, autoimmunity. Every household in the world is now one degree of separation from these topics that we're talking about. And so I really want to reframe the issue now as to there is not diabetes as a phenomenon. There is diabetes as, not a disease, but actually as a door opening. And so the collapse of your relationship to light energy within the food you consume is a pathway forward for you. And I can guarantee you that if you, without fear, guilt, and shame, start to move into that wound rather than recoil and try to fix the wound, you're going to find some of the most profound, beautiful things about yourself that you can possibly imagine. And so every one of my cancer patients, 2 years, 3 years into the journey of, their healing process, every single one of which looked different, always told me in the end, my cancer was the greatest gift in my life. It wasn't, like greatest gift in my healing life. It was the greatest gift in my life because it changed my relationship to self, which changed my relationship to my children, to my church, to my synagogue, to my community at large, to the world, and ultimately took me straight back out into nature. And it is out in being in nature that I got to find out how beautiful I was. So that is basically, in a nutshell, the healing journey of, my entire medical career. In a nutshell, this is how you heal. Begin the journey into the wound. The antidote for your healing always lies directly inside the wound. Nature has devised everything this way. You don't have to go search out for yourself. In fact, if you do, you're taking yourself on that hero's journey where you're going to have to go crash and burn and destroy yourself. And then you'll have a little cadre of weird people that come around you and help you back towards your own hero experience of being yourself. And so the hero's journey, which always includes a donkey, right? Your team that actually gets you act as some dumb donkey who's comical and ridiculous, or some other animal joins the thing and suddenly you're better. And so Disney's version of the hero journey feels like my clinic. I think I was the dumb ass that continued to come alongside everybody in some sort of comical mistakes that I continued to make all the time, thinking I'd found this thing and I'd found this thing and I'd found this thing. And really my job was to show people, oh my God, it's you. You're the damn thing. Holy shit, we've been looking all over the place for all these things, and you're the magic. You're the miracle. You're the healing process. You're the thing that's going to cure. And so as Dr. Lee and myself and the nurse practitioners and Bridget with every client hold space for you, we are ultimately doing our best work when we reflect back at you that you were perfect and therefore you became real. You were perfect in the womb as an energy field, such that 70 trillion cells would birth themselves out of a single egg, not as copies of the egg, but would differentiate every single cell differently to become a coherent symphony of life playing itself out in such a way that you would become a perfect fetus with 10 fingers, 10 toes. Maybe some of you got lucky and got 11, but there is an incredible journey into perfection that you did in the womb without a single drug, without a single technology. You were the technology. You are the technology that allows life to form in the womb of your mother and become you. And so is there anything that we're ever going to uncover that actually perfects that, improves upon that? And the answer in my career so far is absolutely not. In fact, everything I'm going to add to you is got the risk of taking you further away from self. And so it is my practice in my life these days and in my clinical interaction on the journey of intrinsic health is to remind you, if I'm about to tell you that this is going to help you, it's because it's a journey back into self. It's not the thing that's going to help you. But so all of that's the disclaimer of I'm about to tell you a few things that can help you, but I don't want you to think the things are the things. It is the discovery of self that you can have through these things. And one of them is called the 4-minute workout. It's the most popular piece I've ever put online, more views than anything else. And Dr. Lee's recommendation of the walking is how I really, perfected this, I think. If you will begin a walk, walking has a very interesting interaction with the bone. A little bit of impact exercise. So a brisk walk, a jog, a bounce on a trampoline, that movement of bone activates the endocrine system in a really cool way. And so vibration or impact on the skeleton is critical. And then the bone is now recognized as to be the most active endocrine organ in the whole body. We have now been able through peptide sequencing to find 4,000 different hormones in the human body. Of these, we've named about 40. And so of the 4,000, we've named 40. We have absolutely no idea of the function of the 4,000, but recent studies in genomics are starting to show that the vast majority of those 4,000 hormones that have yet to be discovered as to their function are coming out of your bone. Thyroid makes one hormone, pineal makes a hormone, your pituitary gland makes half a dozen hormones. And so there's nothing that compares to bone and as to its endocrine function. And interestingly, its interaction with light, the crystal structure of bone, very unique in its liquid crystal capacity to hold information and light energy. So move and impact the bone. So impact exercise. And then the 4-minute workout is something you would do halfway through your walk. So if you walk a mile, 4 miles, halfway through, stop and do the 4-minute workout. And the 4-minute workout was designed to move the 16 largest muscle bodies or the muscle groups in your body for about a minute, minute and a half to run it out of oxygen. And so the marriage of impact exercise with anaerobic exposure at the muscle level, at the vascular level, invigorates an explosion of mitochondrial metabolism. Coupled with that, cold plunge. Cold plunge forces your thermal exchange or the thermal production of heat. And that's the big explosion of mitochondrial metabolism again. So cold plunge works because it forces the mitochondria to reproduce, and you have more mitochondria at the end of the day than you did at the beginning of the day. That's a good thing. And then the last piece of this puzzle is get back into the soil system of the gut. And so in our clinic, we've been able to or in our basic science lab, here I'll show a picture because it's sometimes worth 1,000 words. But this is what happens to those mitochondria when put back in right relationship with soil intelligence or the microbial environment here. So I'm going to share this screen here if I can do it. Share. And there it is. All right. So here you're taking a look at, let's see if I can get it big for you. Go to the slide here because it's the simplest to look at. This is the effect of glyphosate and then the soil system back on your mitochondrial membrane potential. And so this is looking at the amount of leak, if you will, across the mitochondrial membrane. So high leak, bad thing. Very low leak or very high resilience of the mitochondrial membrane, good thing. So the lower the bar, the more energy you can produce per cubic centimeter in your body. This is at baseline in red. So this is a cell population that hasn't been poisoned and it's sitting there thriving. And then you introduce this sterile petri dish with human cells that are producing a certain amount of mitochondrial energy to microbial information. This is the microbial information stream, or the redox molecules. It's basically the wireless communication network of soil. So there's no bacteria and fungi in this. It's sterile, but you're taking the communication network, the information stream between bacteria and fungi, and showing it to the human cell. And immediately you have more than a 60% reduction in leak across that membrane. And so you remember the elastic underwear thing that Dr. Lee was telling you. Immediately the elastic is functioning, and the stretch is back, and you've decreased the leak. You've got a tight system back in there as the peptides. And this is happening within 2 hours of exposure to complex soil ecosystem information. So this is a liquid supplement is the way that this is put into play, but this same thing happens in your gut lining when you diversify the gut. And so when you do an Ayurvedic diet for a few months and expose yourself to more and more complex elements, and in the journey of intrinsic health, we go into fermentation, all kinds of different things that you can do in the kitchen. Fermenting food is a critically important piece of the puzzle. But fermented foods, especially fermented root vegetables, I'm a huge fan of turnips or beets fermented. And so that's kvass, or in the beets there, and then sour Reuben is often what they call the turnip once it's been fermented. So sauerkraut, sour Reuben, and then kvass. Those elements have a downstream effect of increasing microbial intelligence and microbial diversity within your gut, and you're going to start making these molecules, this wireless communication network, over time as well. And so by getting biodiversity back into your daily experience, whether through supplementation or your cooking practices, your kitchen, your contact with outdoor environments, you're going to do this eutrophication. 60% improvement in mitochondrial membrane potential has never been seen with any drug or anything else. This is what nature does when she embraces a human cell. She increases your relationship to light energy. The amount of ATP that comes out of this, that cell then increases by about 20% without giving it any calories. And so mitochondrial membrane potential improves, ATP production goes up without any calories into the system. It's a miracle. First time we saw this thing happen, like, I just simply didn't believe it. Dr. Zhishen Wang, MD, PhD out of China, is the head of our lab, one of the best basic science benchtop researchers that have ever been around. And his ability to repeat this study over and over again has just dumbfounded me in the quality of data coming out as just how fast nature will correct this. Within 2 hours of exposure, you are erasing decades of injury off the cell and in that mitochondrial potential there. Glyphosate now at 1 part per million, which is very common in all of your food systems and everything else, you can see that immediate increase in leak. At 10 parts per million, this is how much you would be getting in cruciferous vegetables and root vegetables typically grown in conventional things. This is how much you would find in a strawberry, for example, that's on the shelf. If you go to the government watchdog organization, EWG, the Environmental Working Group, they have a great website that highlights the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. The Dirty Dozen are those 12 foods that you must eat organic because the levels of chemical exposure is so high in them. Strawberry is always number 1 on the Dirty Dozen list. Apples are typically 2 or 3. It does depend a little bit on the season and the location you are in the country, but you know, your apples, your citrus, your strawberries, these are just like nuclear bombs of chemicals. So this is way up in the 10 parts per million range of glyphosate, and you can see that you're now injuring up to as much as a 30% injury on the leak of the membrane. So this is decreasing your mitochondrial membrane by 30%. That's like aging forward 40 years. My guess, Dr. Lee, I'm very interested to meet this cheerleader you were talking about at some point. But what came to mind as soon as you said it is, I bet it was her cosmetics. Women that are forced into a very narrow definition of their beauty get pushed into the cosmetic industry at very early ages. And if you get exposed to makeup and the endocrine disruptors in makeup before you are done with puberty, your mitochondrial reserve is far lower the rest of your life, and you're going to have to be on an accelerated aging path. So I'm curious to see if that resonates with you. But the closure of this conversation here is get in touch with soil systems, get in touch with the deeper intelligence of biodiversity. And in my own life, certainly I've first went on the supplements, I started making everything else over the years, and have gotten more and more fascinated by the capacity of those supplements, not only to do this, but also to deliver the micronutrients. The bacteria and fungi produce the carriers that get nutrients into your body. We are starving of nutrients because of our lack of the microbiome in our guts. The human gut is supposed to have about 40,000 species. A Western gut that's raised in a modern food system has about 8,000 species. So you've lost 75% of your soil system by the time you're a kid. And then you try to live your life unable to extract the nutrients. And so when we put nutrients, a lot of that list, chromium, cinnamon, those nutrients are very difficult to get into a human body now. And so we're trying to hyperdose these things like chromium into the diet with a mega vitamin, like was mentioned there. And I've used chromium and cinnamon in my clinics, and they are effective, but you have to have very high doses. What we're finding is if you put tiny doses into these microbial networks of information, they get into 1,000 to 3,000 times more bioavailability. And so over time, you're going to find that nutrient availability has to do with how close was your food to the soil, how much of the soil is carried in the food, quite literally. And in a world where so much of our food is being grown without touching the soil through hydroponics. And so we have hydroponic berries all over the place all year long. Now you can buy raspberries, blackberries, and blueberries all year long, every grocery store in America, because they're never grown in soil anymore. They're grown in artificial environments in water systems without soil. And so this is my concern, is we are engineering a food system that not only has chemicals in it, it is devoid of the messengers and the information and the ultimately the accessible minerals and nutrients within the food that would make you healthy in the first place. So getting back in touch with your soil systems are fun. But I want to show you one really cool thing about this graph. Obviously, these bars get worse and worse with the higher levels of chemical. And to get up to here to the 100 parts per million glyphosate, where you see this in the food system every single day is in cattle feed, the feed of dogs and cats. So our pets, all the way to our protein industries of the not only the cows, but also the chicken and turkeys and the poor swine out there, the pigs. The animal feed is typically around 400 parts per million of glyphosate. So super, super high levels of glyphosate in our animal feeds, both commercially and in industry, as well as in our pet food. So our animals are expressing a huge amount of disease as their lights are shut out from their food system. But the golden beauty here is these declining levels right here. And so you injure at 1 part per million of glyphosate, and then you give it back, this gift of nature here, the green bar, you give that same supplement back at this part, and you completely erase the damage done by the 1 part per million. But look what happens when you go to 10 parts per million. The mitochondrial membrane is even better than at 1 part per million injury. At the highest level of injury, nature has the highest level of grace. This is very similar, I think, to the story that we saw in the rabbits, that they actually had less disease as long as they were loved before they were exposed to the highest levels of toxin. What it shows is nature sees your wound. Nature sees your injury and your trauma and your pain, and she responds in an extraordinary way of grace. And so we are blown away in my lab every day that humans do the most insane things to ourselves and our nature, and nature says, that's okay. Let me give you a hug. Let me heal you even deeper. Oh, you really poisoned the crap out of yourself? I'm going to hug you and love you even more. And I'm going to get you even better for the insanity that you're doing. And so it is possible in my mind that we are taking ourselves to our knees of extinction, infertility, chronic disease, diabetes, obesity, chronic fatigue, chronic pain syndromes, so that our injury is great enough so that we can be embraced to our fullest capacity by a nature that inherently loves you. That's my journey so far. Dr. Lee, I would love to turn back to you for some closing thoughts from you. And of course, we'll turn to you, Bridget, in a moment as well. But I'm so grateful for both of you joining this adventure, and excited to see what all of you do as you start to apply nature and love in your life. Dr. Lee, take it away.
Sure. Well, thank you again for having me on this platform here. So it's been a pleasure. And so I've been a user of your product. I actually like the old name, but I know you don't have the old name, but the new name, Ion. But I like the other name because it rolls off. So I tell my patients I prefer the old one. But
We did too.
I'm always impressed because every time we go out for like dinner, you just pull out of your pocket a little travel size of Ion and just pour in my water. And anyway, so
Because I love
I
you.
tell my patients, look, I had the privilege to have dinner with Dr. Zachary Bush, and anyway, you just shake up the bottle, put a little in your water, and take your supplements, and it's easy peasy, and it feeds the microbiome. So I think this is a wonderful product. So I really believe the body can heal itself, and I really believe that there is. If you get your hormones balanced, because as we get older, we do lose our hormones. So if you optimize that, that will help. I look at leaky gut. Our clinic looks at leaky gut, so we try to fix the microbiome and also the leaky gut there. Try to work on detoxing to remove these environmental toxins, and in addition, we work on sleep, exercise, and in addition, we talk about nutrition. So we recommend IV nutrition if you're close by, because that's the fastest way for your body to heal itself. So, and then the other part is heart rate variability. That's something new that I'm looking at and encourage my patients to get some device and just try to work on it. Over time, you can improve on that, because I think that a lot of people that you see and I see and Bridget see and everyone else sees is just stress. And it's amazing. There's some people out there that they could write. I mean, you can't even invent it. I mean, the stories I hear is just blows my mind. Like, you can write a Netflix series on it and be a top seller there. But anyway, it's just, I see so many people, just especially after COVID, their world got turned upside down, and so much anxiety has basically, they had no control in their life anymore. So anxiety kind of like came out. But you can actually do a couple, just nice, get in touch and hopefully work with certain things, and so that you can reverse some of these things. And genetic testing also helps. We look at genetic SNPs. So you can see, the pathway of serotonin or your pathway of dopamine, pathway of norepinephrine, see which way you're at, because we're born, everyone has a different genetic minor defect, and there are some natural things you can do to overcome it. So, and I look at these tests and it's amazing. Like, if you don't do much, you have so much catecholamine, so much dopamine, norepinephrine, that you may have worsening anxiety that may present down the road as schizophrenic. And the drugs that should lower schizophrenia is to lower dopamine. And there are things you can do naturally to balance things. So I think that's something really exciting that's current, is looking at genetic testing and looking at different SNPs. There's one thing I want to present. If you can put up one slide, Jesse, is if you can help me, because I started a non-for-profit organization to save peptides, and I've been like, this petition's been going on for like 3 years. I only have less than 6,000 signatures, but if you go to savepeptides.org and put your first name, last name, your email address, I would really appreciate it. It will go to your two senators where you live and your representative, and we're trying to really save peptides from the FDA. And the thing is that I really believe we can do it, and we just need more signatures. So just spread the word. I'm not a social media influencer. I don't even have social media. I don't even know how Facebook works. I'm kind of old-fashioned, but anyway, please spread the message, and we need more signatures. So just go savepeptides.org, because it's your medical freedom that's at risk. And when they take away peptides, next may be hormones, and next may be nutritional supplements. So we're going to be really screwed. So it's really, it's all censorship, and no one wants to be censored. So these are safe, no one's dying. And anyway, it's these peptides, it's, to me, is like a really regenerative, and has helped to reverse a lot of conditions that I've seen. So anyway, just thank you if you can sign the petition. Thank you.
Please do take the time to discover the petition. It is important. Be really meaningful for us to have a voice here as a group to say that we do want to be able to claim our own health freedom and health decisions for the future. The FDA, at the same time that it wiped 22 peptides off the market, it wiped 23 companies and products off the market, including our sinus product. And so we've had for 5 years, we've been audited by the FDA a couple times in the past without a single problem. And suddenly they recategorized all of these as drugs and not supplements, and then held us accountable to drug kind of compliance, production, everything else. And what the result was 23 products came off the market just between August and December this year. So the current administration has empowered the FDA to try to really whittle down any competition with the pharmaceutical model. And so being a voice to your senators right now is very important. I think we really need to show the Democrats that, we cannot overregulate this at the detriment of taking away the decision of the practitioner and the patient at the bedside. And if you don't have the freedom to participate in the innovations that will show us our future, then you are really surrendering yourself to a medical industrial complex that has a horrible track record of results. The medical industrial complex has overseen the development of the sickest country in the world, which is the United States of America. We have never had so much disease in the world as we do in this country. We are the sickest country in the world. We have more death on day one. Our neonatal death on day one, the highest of any country in the world, in the industrialized world. So this is just an incredible moment for us to begin to reclaim our health future. And so whether you're inspired by the technologies that Dr. Lee is talking about or not, please be inspired to not let the government make those decisions for you. And so signing that petition with Dr. Lee will be huge for us. I appreciate everybody participating. Bridget, turning to you now for the last closing thoughts on your side as you reflect on everything heard and a little bit on how we can connect with your extraordinary clinical resources that you have there in Charlottesville, Virginia and beyond.
Yeah, sure. I think the last thing I would say is, what you eat is important, and how you eat and how you take in everything that surrounds you is the key. And developing systems that you love around that is a great path to unwinding whatever has already occurred in your life. Everything is about bringing more balance, more peace, more bliss, more stability and comfort. And that would be my main message. Find that rest, and that will benefit. You can reach me at Wellness Center is my, you can find me on Instagram, or my website is probably the best way. And I see people both virtually and in person, and I do group events, individual things. And I'm happy to just talk to anyone for a couple minutes and maybe point them in the right direction of another practitioner if I'm not the right one. So I'd love to hear from anyone.
If you feel like you're ready for a major reset on your health journey and you would like a team around you to achieve that, Bridget has helped build the journey of intrinsic health over time. The journeyofintrinsichealth.com. We can throw up a website for you there. You can see that in the show notes. The journey is currently enrolling our next cohort, actually. And so our group coaching is the most popular product. It puts you in a group of 6 or 8 people that go through an 8-week journey together of healing. And I was super resistant to group coaching when we first rolled it out, but the pandemic was suggesting people needed community deeply. And so I finally surrendered my rule, which was everybody gets their own coach to do group coaching. And we were blown away by the results. Watching each other heal is one of the best medicines I've ever discovered in my life. And so in groups of 6 or 8 people at a time, you'll go through an 8-week journey in which we give you back a new relationship to food, water, breath, exercise, fasting, community, and perhaps my favorite one, play. Reorienting everything in the context of the fact that you are playing with self on a journey of life. And it is in your discovery of the joy on the journey that really gives you that deathbed moment where you say, it was all perfect. I am so grateful for the life I've lived, whether long or short. It was perfect because I got to play in this thing that we call life, which is the finding our way back to self. And so each of you are invited back into this journey. If you don't want to take the whole 8-week course, you can actually just join the membership, which is just a community now. And we have an app that organizes the community. We have weekly events, we have monthly Q&A experiences with me. And so joining the community, I think, is a super potent beginning point. It's cheap. It's just a few dollars a month to join the Journey of Intrinsic Health community. And then the coaching experience, obviously quite a lot more expensive for us to put into play, because our coaches are paid to take you on this journey. But that experience we have seen be the most transformational thing that anybody has tapped into. If any of you are life coaches and health coaches out there, we do have the Coach's Journey, which trains you with CME credits to a new certification as a journey coach. And that coaching experience has been taken by coaches all over the world, who many of them have been practicing for decades. And to the last one, they say, nothing has changed my practice of coaching more than this journey has. This has changed me as a person, let alone my business and my efforts to help others on the journey. So super excited about the achievements of these groups that have put this together. Behind the scenes, Jesse Gardner today is really behind my entire educational effort over the last 8 years. So Jesse has been a huge gift to me and the world at large. So Jesse Gardner, you're hidden behind the scenes here. Mary McQuate has been with me for 2 years as of today, our 2-year anniversary of your assistance, Mary. So thank you for your deep and long kept efforts on the day to engage community. Without you two, I would not have an interface with the community. And without all of you, I would not have community. So I would ask for some help. I have put everything on the table in the last 12 months. I have emptied every bank account I have, started new nonprofits, started new products, new companies, everything else. And so the tank is empty because we've got it all on the playing field right now. And putting on this event, it's $7,000 a month for us to have a Zoom account that can handle 10,000 of you. And so if nothing else, if you could cover our costs with just putting on these events, we would love your support. We don't charge for Global Health Education Summits. It's fully funded by all of you over the years. And so you can go to my website, zachbushmd.com, and help donate there to the Global Health Education series so that we can continue these. We feel that they are important avenues of connection for the global community and a place for us to have safe dialogue about health freedom and the opportunities and resources that you have at your disposal to be with us. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, Bridget Baylin, and thank you, Edwin Lee, for joining. It's been a thrill to learn from you and so excited for this audience to engage with both of you. Thank you all for joining.